Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
How you doing, Peter?
George, I am
hanging in.
A little all over the place today, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's been a tough week for everybody.
I think between the state of the world, the current events, the weather, sort of everything that I touch on a day-to-day basis is weighing me down a little bit more than usual this week, but mostly current events and what's happening over in Russia and Ukraine.
Totally. No, I hear that.
It's hitting me on a cellular level. I'm not myself.
Yeah, I think in some ways that's good. You know, that we're absorbing, what's going on in the world, not apathetic to it. So, want to get into some reactions?
Let's react.
All right, cool. Here's Humphrey Yang.
I just got a part-time job. I'm going to start investing $200 a month.
He wants to invest $200 a month.
I'm good. I got better things to do. I'll do that later.
Better things to do than invest.
10 years later.
Hey, happy birthday. Thanks, man. I'm 30 now. I guess I'll start this investing thing.
You missed out.
I'll invest more than
you waited too long.
$250 a month.
Oh, $250
awesome,
a month.
But I'm going to stick with $200 a month.
This is a classic business school time value of money calculation.
I'm so glad we started investing, man. My $250 a month is now worth $657K with returns.
How did the other guy do?
Not bad. I'm at 1.173 million. How do you have almost more than double? I contributed more than you for almost 30 years. Even though we roughly contributed the same over time, that
power of compounding, time value of money. George,
I should have started
This
earlier.
is Business School 101. So, look, I got an MBA in finance and economics. I went to business school. I've been exposed to this stuff for a long, long time. For those of you out there just hearing about the concept of time value of money for the first time, let me break it down. The longer you put the money to work, compounding, the better off you are. So investor 1 started at 20, investor 2 started at 30, and it doesn't matter that investor number 2 invested more money each month than the first investor. The first investor won. Why? Because time value of money, compounding. Those 10 years, even at the lower amounts, created more of a compounding effect. And you want to put your money to work for longer periods of time. Guys, investing is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Success, marathon, not a sprint. Everything in life worth having, marathon, not a sprint. They're just corroborating everything that we've been talking about here, George, for a long, long time. You have to get started. Getting started today is better than getting started tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you're not an investor. Become one, and become one now. Become one today. It's better than if you become one tomorrow or next week or next year. Start today. There's plenty of ways to get access to investing. You can start with $10, $100, whatever it is. But get started, be disciplined, be regular, be committed, and keep doing it. Because if you do, you're going to be like investor number 1 here, who had $1.7 million or whatever he had at the end of this thing. And he was just disciplined. He stuck with it. Time value of money, compounding of interest. Time is everything. If you're compounding interest, you want time. If you're young, you have time on your side. If you're older, if you start later, you have less time on your side. Time is the one thing we can't control. When we have more of it, it's an asset. So if you're an investor, use your time asset and get started sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever asked you this. You said you learned about this and everyone talks about this at business school. Was this also something that your parents knew about growing up? And was that something that was ever talked about in your house? In terms of
investing was always talked about in my house, but not the time value of money. Specifically, the time value of money is a textbook concept, especially that phrase, time value of money. That's the literal name of the concept that they teach in the books. It just tells you from a technical and an academic perspective, everything that myself and others are out there saying, which is just get started. Get started. Now is better than tomorrow. Today is better than next year. Guys, that's time value of money. You want time working for you. When you have more time, invest sooner. And more time produces better results than if you invest later. Even if you invest more dollars later, get started. I can't say it enough. Hit me with a frying pan, knock me down on the floor until I'm dead. You got to get started. Seriously, I'm getting sick of saying it. You're getting sick of hearing it. Get started today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Think like an investor. If you can think like an investor and think like an owner, you're already 90% of the way there. Now just get started. Pull the trigger. Get started. $100, $200, $10, doesn't matter. Do it for yourself. Do it for your kids. Do it with your kids. Do it together as a family. Have everyone talking about what they want to invest in together. Do we want to invest in real estate, stocks, farmland, debt? Like there's all sorts of apps and companies and offerings that's available to the regular non-accredited investor where you can do a little bit of research, become comfortable, and get started. Time is the best thing you have going for you. It's never too late, but it's a whole lot better if you start early.
All right, the second one is from Brent B. Shore. Is that another one?
Brent B. Shore?
Brent B.
Or is
Shore.
it Brent B. Shore?
I think it's Brent B. Shore. I heard it said recently.
Oh,
but
really?
I would like to think
How can
that
you
it's
be sure?
Wow, I walked right into that one.
I'm here all week. You want to know why I get paid the big bucks?
I do.
That's why.
It's the dad jokes. All right, so Brent Bashore says, and for those who've never owned/operated a business, stuff always goes wrong, constantly. All businesses are loosely functioning disasters that sometimes make money. Those who are successful long-term are able to create redundancies and absorb the inevitable big shocks. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for the large part, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't know that all businesses are loosely, what did he say?
Loosely functioning disasters.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a difference between a well-run business and a not well-run business. The well-run businesses are not loosely functioning disasters at all, hanging on by a thread. No, but the significant majority of businesses fail, 90%, 95%, whatever the number is, and they all fail for a slew of very common reasons. More ideas than execution is a surefire way to kill a business. Undercapitalized, no strategy, no scalability. There's all sorts of reasons why businesses fail. So George, he says those who are successful long-term are able to create redundancies. So he's talking about systems. You create a system to absorb recurring tasks. You and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
If you make a system out of things that repeat, jobs and tasks that repeat, you can be very efficient and you can move on to other things. That's how you scale. You can't scale without systems. You can't scale without redundancies. There's no way you're going to grow or be successful if you've just got a bunch of random one-off things filling up your day every day over and over again. You have to create the redundancies. You have to create the systems. Every successful business does. You know, I love the example of McDonald's where the truck pulls up and the red box goes up the conveyor belt and they take it in, they put it on the red shelf, they pull out the red product, they put it in the microwave, hit the red button, it goes to the cashier. Cashier pushes the red button and they charge you $3.19. It's so automated, they make it as if a monkey can do it. There's no thought. You just follow the color coding all the way from truck delivery to consumer. And it's a great system. So think about ways to systemize your business, your personal life, whatever it is. Systems, redundancies, that's one of the ways you win. It's a big one. Implement those things.
Fantastic. Another great reaction room. I'll see you over at the table.
Thanks, George.
Welcome back to the table, Peter.
George, what are you wearing today?
Well, so I'm wearing, I thought about this when I put the shirt on, if you were going to ask. Armor Luxe, and you speak a little French, right?
Armor Luxe, is that a French company?
It is a French company, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I wasn't sure if you would know.
Armor Luxe.
Yeah, Armor Luxe. Yeah, so that's the Navy. I guess it's a French Navy shirt, technically. That's the
Could
style.
be Swiss.
Yeah. So.
Could be Belgian. Could be any one of those origins. And more. It could be Moroccan.
Yes, you asked me what drives my style. What drives your style? What drives your fashion choices?
Sexiness. Most of the time. What drives my style? Well, thank you for acknowledging that I have style.
Yeah, no problem.
No one else does in my life. I just want to not look like a douche, and I want to look like I've got my shit together.
Yeah.
And I want to be comfortable.
Was there anybody in your life that you were like, oh, I want to look like that? Or is it just like, oh, these clothes look good, I'm going to buy this?
No, except for until I saw the show Ray Donovan.
Oh, yeah.
That guy dressed great in that show. He always wore like a black suit with a black shirt, or a black suit with a white shirt, or it was great. Yeah. And he never wore a tie, but it that black suit was just badass. And
Liev Schreiber, right?
Yeah. And it was black. Like during the day, good. Yeah. And at night, black is good. And like dinners, it was good. And when he went to beat the shit out of people, it was good. And he was able to like move and function without being inhibited by wearing, business clothing or a suit. Like he was able to punch and swing a baseball bat.
Yeah, that's what it's about. It's about functionality and style.
Me, when I put on this suit this morning, I put my shoes on last, and I couldn't bend my legs far enough to get my shoes tied because my pants were, the wool and everything. It just gets tight, and you don't have full movement. So I don't think I'm really achieving the Ray Donovan thing.
We're not ready for the Van Damme scene with the
with the stretchy kicking jeans.
Yeah,
I need those.
I usually ask you at the end if there's anything you want to talk about, but has there been anything on your mind before we get into what I've kind of gathered?
I said over there when we were doing the reactions, I'm feeling a little weighed down and impacted by everything that's happening in Ukraine right now, and we're in 2022, and here we are. And this is the world that we're in still. And I say still because it's reminiscent of World War II, and 2 million people are fleeing. It's the largest population of people moving across Europe in history since the Second World War. And I can't believe that this is where we live today, and this is how we live today. It's sad. I think about it all day long.
Yeah. And as I said over in the reaction room, I feel like that's not a bad thing. It's like I feel like that should be how you react as a human being when other people suffer.
Yeah, it's just sad, man. And I have a young daughter, and she doesn't know what's happening, and it's amazing that she can live in her world is like great, like everything's fine in her world, but like in the world, it's not great right now.
Although it is interesting, you mentioned your daughter being young, and something that has given me hope in this period of time is before cameras were rolling, we were talking about how popular the war was in Russia. And it is very popular, unfortunately, but that amongst young people, it's not. And a lot of that is because they're more connected to the globe, and they have more access to information that's not being given to them through the government. And that's, I think, a sliver of hope in all of this.
It's not a fair playing field, though, because
not at all. No,
the government's controlling the media narrative.
Yeah.
There's no Facebook. There's no Twitter. There's no news telling honest stories.
Yeah,
they're controlling the narrative. They're telling people that they're going to go demilitarize the Nazi the regime in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so, isn't that great? And everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's great," but that's what they're saying, but that's
not the reality.
It's propaganda, and they're going in and doing what they want, when they want, how they want, with zero regard. I mean, shit, they just bombed a maternity hospital with women and children with no regard. It's murdering, and it's sad. And look, this isn't the first time we've seen it. I mean, there's been horrible things and circumstances in Africa over the past recent years, and in other countries in the Middle East. I mean, there's things happening all the time.
Somalia,
it's just,
Yemen, there's
so
a lot.
I don't mean to dwell on the Ukraine as like the sole example. It's not, but it's what's happening now and most prominently, and it's impacting me, as have all the other things. But it's for some reason this is really bothering me. So.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense.
I digress. Let's move on.
Our prayers and thoughts with Ukraine. I think it's important.
And money and efforts. I've got people in my life that I know that are stopping everything they're doing, and they're deploying private jets and money and medicine and doctors and clothing and blankets and food and water, and they're flying over to Poland, and they're distributing these things to the refugee. I mean, it's an amazing thing to see, and I'm proud to know these people. I don't want to send just thoughts and prayers. I want to send more of I don't have a jet to load up with resources. I've sent some money.
Yeah.
But in addition to thoughts and prayers, I want to send more of these types of people, because governments can only do so much and move so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's great that they're doing it. Anyway, sorry.
No, totally. No, it's okay. I mean, we're going to stay in line with that a little bit.
Okay.
So the war in Ukraine has stalled the rapid increase in mortgage rates, according to Redfin.
Yeah, it has.
This kind of reminded me of at the beginning of June 2020, before pandemic, we talked about how everything is just really interconnected.
Everything in our economy is so tied together. It's really a lesson on, in some ways, on how fragile we are. Everything's interconnected. Everything touches everything.
Yeah, how does your awareness of that interconnectedness affect how you invest in particular markets and allocate capital, or just live in general?
It completely impacts how I invest and how I allocate capital and how I live my day-to-day life. With this kind of thing happening in our world today in the Ukraine, I'm reverse engineering and doing the math to figure out how the dots connect and impact me, and I'm making decisions accordingly. I mean, I'm very, very cautious going into new investments right now. We're talking about speculation of $300 a barrel oil. I mean, that's going to really impact supply chains, prices for goods, time for delivery, and so many other industries, travel, tourism, shipping, trucking. All of that stuff's going to be crazy. Now, we can get our oil from other places and maybe not be so impacted by $300 a barrel oil coming out of Europe. But if the price increases in oil ripple across to our supply of it and it gets into $200, $250, $300 a barrel, it's going to crush the United States economy. It's going to crush average families, everyday families, Americans, not just in our country, but everywhere. It's going to crush us. So I'm highly cognizant of that, just as one example. Food supply, I mean, you're going to see the price of food rapidly rise, not because of the pandemic, but in addition to, but also the war is really going to impact food supply. Something like 70 or 80% of the world's onion supply comes from the Ukraine. That's done.
Breadbasket of the world, that's what they call it.
Right. You're going to start to see the other onion farming and production facilities ramp up pricing. All their contracts for products that they've delivered already are expired. They can enter into new contracts with new pricing, and it's going to take into account the price of oil, the fact that Ukraine's not shipping out onions, that there's so much demand for onions. Watch, you're going to see price of food's going to go through the roof. Now you've got oil going through the roof, gas going through the roof, food going through the roof. I mean, food and energy are the two things that everybody in the world consumes.
Yeah, it drives everything.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is really going to be an incredible taxation on average Americans and people everywhere. And the way I make decisions, absolutely. Everything's connected. You have to know what's happening in every corner of the world to know what you should do in your little spot in the world. For sure, all the time. So we have to watch the Middle East. We have to watch China. We have to watch Europe. I mean, these are the places that we've been talking about. Great example of why we have to watch them, because it's impacting us now. If you don't think it's impacting you, get your head out of your ass. You're not paying attention. You have to know what's happening. I read newspapers from all over the world every day. I have a friend that reads 40 newspapers a day. It's incredible how he does that. I don't read 40, but I read a lot. I need to know what's happening in the UK. I need to know what's happening in China. I need to know what's happening in the EU and the Middle East. The confluence of all of these policies and governments and products and imports and exports and finance, markets. I mean, there's a confluence of all of those things that dictates in part our lives, as well as what happens here in our country. Guys, you got to know.
Yeah.
Read, stay up on this stuff. Be informed. If you don't know what's happening in the world, you're not going to know what to do in your own house with your own family.
That makes sense. You bring up the supply chain issue. That one aspect of that right now is trucks are in high demand, trying to transport more goods.
Truckers, trucks,
all that kind of stuff. One proposed solution that I've heard is these autonomous trucks that'll be on highways, and then they have to be stored.
It's coming.
Kind of off. Yes.
I have a friend who's just gotten into that industry, and he's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's. It's quite impressive. This guy's an impressive guy, and it's an impressive industry and effort that they're making, and there's going to be driverless trucks and automated trucks.
Yes, we can discuss that separately if you want. But my question...
Thank you.
Well, no. It's just like that is something that I feel like we've talked about before. So that's fodder for conversation. But what I'm really curious about is... Fodder. Is...
I am your father.
I am your father.
That to store these things, to store the autonomous trucks, a lot of property is in high demand just outside of highways, and zoning is a key issue there. So what I'm curious is how heavily does zoning weigh in on the success of real estate deals for you, and what do multifamily operators need to know?
So I'm going to have you ask that question again, but zoning weighs in heavily on the sex of real estate. All right, go ahead, ask again.
How heavily does zoning weigh in on the success of real estate deals, and what do multifamily owners and operators have to know to be successful with zoning?
So two different questions. Yeah. Zoning is central to any real estate transaction. The first thing I do when I'm under contract to purchase something is I obtain a zoning analysis. I need to know what I'm allowed to do with my property that I'm about to buy. I need to know if the current use of the property is permissible, if it expires at any point in time, if there's certain terms and conditions that I'm obligated to uphold in order to maintain the current zoning status, or otherwise my use can be considered abandoned or foregone, and it reverts back to some other use. I mean, there's so many things that can happen if you don't have your hands around the zoning. It's issue number one that I spend time and money on to get my hands around knowing the answers to when I'm buying anything. So zoning's critical in multifamily because I buy a lot of buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. I'm looking for zoning that's either conforming or non-conforming use. George, if I buy an older building that's been there for a long time and the rest of the neighborhood has evolved and developed, but my building's still sitting there, it's likely a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Got it.
We've all heard the phrase grandfathered. Oh, that's grandfathered in. That liquor license is grandfathered in. That use is grandfathered in. And what we're saying is it's so old that it predates any of the recent laws, zoning, or legislation that has been on the books, that it's just sitting there. And if it were to burn down, you might not be able to rebuild that same use. So for an apartment building, I take out what's called law and ordinance, L&O insurance policies. And that protects me if my building's a pre-existing non-conforming use, George. Many of them are. So if there's a fire, I don't get to rebuild my apartment building as of right. We've talked about as of right. Like, I have to go seek permission. I have to go in front of a zoning board and say, hey, my pre-existing non-conforming use burnt down. Can I rebuild that non-conforming use?
Right.
Because you have single family houses all around and I'm an apartment building. And they could say no.
Yeah.
So I have to take out insurance and pay for expensive insurance, L&O, law and ordinance insurance, that will cover me if my building burns down and I can't rebuild. And it's a very complicated thing, and it can be very costly. Zoning, you have to know your zoning. Another thing I look for in zoning is FAR, floor area ratios, density ratios. Can I expand my building? Is there unused impervious surfaces that I can expand a parking lot? Can I add another story? Can I add another 2 units around the corner where there's a big unused corner of empty grass? You know, I have to check with my zoning. Every town has its own zoning ordinances that dictate density, square footage, impervious surfaces, height, FAR, floor area ratio. All of this stuff is addressed in your local town's zoning ordinances. You have to know this stuff. I mean, look, if you're going to buy your building and never touch it, never do anything, never add any value, never try and extract any more value out of it, you know, maybe there's a little less pressure for you to know about the zoning details because you're not going to build or expand anything. But you still better know your zoning details because you need to know if you're a pre-existing non-conforming use or if you're a conforming use. And all of that matters because when you go to pull permits, if you have to rebuild anything, it all matters. They're going to delay you. They're going to say that you need to hire lawyers, planners, and engineers and architects to come before them and make presentations as to why you should maintain a pre-existing non-conforming use. George, it's a web and a hornet's nest of stuff. You got to know this stuff. So for multifamily owners and operators, make sure it's the first thing you look at, confirm what your zoning is, see what your zoning opportunities are. I'll tell you a story. There's a deal I'm involved in right now. It's a 3-story house. Each story is 2,700 square feet, so it's a total of like 8,200 square feet,
okay,
the whole structure. And it was built as a 6-family house. So 2 units, 2 units, 2 units, 2 per floor, 3 stories, 6 units. And I've had this property for 5 years, and I'm seeking to reduce from 6 units down to 3 units. I want to make 1 luxury high-end unit per floor because I think that's going to have more demand in the marketplace. Well, I've just gotten my approvals for that. And now I'm faced with the decision of whether I want to build or not. I've obtained the zoning. Sometimes you buy property just for the zoning because zoning's so hard to get. So I've swam through the waters and fought the battles for the past 5 years. I've been up against zoning and planning boards. I've spent a fortune on architects and planners and lawyers to help get me the zoning entitlements that I just got. Now my property is entitled with this new zoning. It's impossible to get. High barrier of entry to achieve what I've just achieved. So I can either decide to build and make real and go to market and sell the product as a result of this new zoning, or I can just sell my property with the new zoning entitlements in place, and the value's been created. So you hear a lot of times that developers will buy raw land and they'll bring in utilities and they'll get zoning and entitlements, and then they'll sell the whole package of entitlements and zoning to another developer who will then take it and go up out of the ground. That happens every day. That's all zoning. So there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of money to be lost in knowing or not knowing what the zoning opportunities are for your particular piece of real estate. You got to know about the zoning.
Yeah, wow. So the value add doesn't even have to be a physical change to the property.
It doesn't have to be. You can just get permissions.
Yeah.
Permissions in and of themselves have value. And someone will pay you more for the work that you did and the money that you spent to get those permissions.
Yeah, that's wild. It's not what you own, it's what you control. It's something we talk about.
That's my mantra.
We love it.
Yep.
In New York City, there's a bill that's seeking to require LLCs to disclose what they call beneficial owners who have membership interest in the LLC. Do you see this as undercutting some of the benefits of that separation that an LLC allows?
No, George, because it's not what you own, it's what you control, as opposed to something about anonymity or privacy of the beneficial owners of the LLC.
Yeah.
So I think they're doing that in New York because they need to understand who to serve, either financial notices to, penalties to. They're trying to find Russian oligarchs right now.
Yep.
And a lot of these international buyers are hidden within layers and layers of LLCs. So I believe that the bill trying to get passed in New York is for those reasons. I mean, I'm fine with people knowing that I'm the principal of a particular LLC. It has nothing to do with why I wanted to be in an LLC in the first place. Remember, I own property in an LLC, a single asset LLC entity. That LLC owns one asset, this piece of property that's specific to the LLC. And I don't care that people know or don't know that I'm the guy in the LLC. So it's fine. It's not impacting my control, and it's not impacting my ownership. Now, if I'm a nefarious guy and I'm a bad actor and I'm a Russian oligarch and I'm a international man of mystery and drug dealing and crime, and I'm hiding behind LLCs, I think they probably want to know who the beneficial owners of LLCs are for those reasons. I'm all for that. New York City, in this example, if they want to know who's behind an LLC, I mean, they know it's me every single time. I register my LLCs in New York sometimes. My name's all over the city's tax documents and other recorded public instruments, and so they'll see my signature. I mean, it's fine. But if you really want to hide in an LLC and use a web of attorneys and other entities to shield your identity, that's different from wanting to own real estate and control it with an LLC for risk mitigation and for layers of separation of liability and things like that. I mean, they're two completely different topics. Yeah. I have no problem being known for the LLCs that I own.
Do you watch college basketball at all?
I'm a fan of college basketball. Yeah. I mean, I love March Madness. I'm usually in Colorado when it's going on, and it's so much fun because it's spring break and all the young people are out there in the ski town that I go to, and cool. it's a big party, and everyone's watching the games. I watch the games. Yeah. I went to a school where the only good sports teams we had was a basketball team.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So is that American University?
American University.
Yeah. Okay.
Occasionally you'll see them in the March Madness rounds. But
so the reason I bring it up is, do you hear this thing about Duke that they have?
Coach K.
Yes, Coach K's last game is coming up, and so now tickets are really sky high.
Yeah, it's a big event. Everyone wants to go. They're selling for thousands of dollars.
Crazy. So I think it was 17,000 is the closest thing
17,000
on the secondhand market
to go to the Duke game. His last game.
And
that's a lot.
And those are just the upper echelon.
That's the
seats.
nosebleeds.
Yeah. So the court side, which is reserved for students. Yeah. You can't buy those, but they're being appraised, so to speak, for 20,000, so somewhere closer to that.
The tickets are
on the secondhand market, and so my question for you is that it's tough to say. There's this article that came out, I forget where it was, I think Washington Post, and they were saying that land where the students have to live, they have this whole thing of
they're pitching tents.
Yeah, it's a tent city situation where they go in, they live in the tent, and
it's like getting tickets to a Michael Jackson concert in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you had to show up and sleep outside for days.
Yeah, and there's all these rules, and you have to take a test in order to get tickets. So
what kind of test?
So it's a test about the basketball team. So it's
really?
This player,
really?
what is their middle name?
That's ridiculous.
And the maiden name of their mother. Yeah, so it's all these questions that are really intense. So the thing is that because it's so difficult, people are coming in, economists are saying, this is a $20 million plot of land. I don't know how accurate that kind of
So they're saying that the land where
the
the tents are being pitched is now worth $20 million when it wasn't yesterday.
Correct.
All because it's the coach's last game.
it's a real estate bubble is what they're calling it. Yeah.
Okay, it is.
So
well, it's a hypothetical real estate bubble.
Right.
I think they're saying it's an example of what a bubble would be in the real world. And do you see anything like it in the real world that parallels?
And that was my question. Yeah, exactly. So do you see any parallels of this situation in the real world?
Well, so this is a great Econ 101 class. So this is exactly how bubbles are formed. Here you've got a bunch of kids pitching tents outside in a piece of muddy grass just to get tickets to this basketball game. That muddy grass had no value yesterday. Today it has $20 million arguably worth of value. Yep. And after the game, what's the grass going to be?
Zero again.
Zero. So that, I think we can all agree, is a pretty clear example of a bubble. Now, if you look around our country and other parts of the world, you see real estate prices at all-time highs. In many, many, many places, prices for homes and property and land, buildings have never been higher. So is that a bubble? Well, is there an event, either economic or otherwise, that's going to occur tomorrow or some other time in the future that's all of a sudden going to magically make the land not worth anything, like the tents being pitched on the muddy grass at Duke University? I mean, once this basketball game is come and gone, no one's going to be there. There's no value to that land. So is there anything that's going to happen in a particular market that we think perhaps is a bubble where that event's going to occur and then the value for the land is going to be completely gone and we're going to be stuck with nothing? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm hard-pressed to think of an example that mirrors that right now. Sure, real estate prices are very high. Sure, there's a lot of demand and economic data points that point towards why real estate prices are high. But I don't see the rug getting pulled out very swiftly or very abruptly and tied to one single event that would make all the value disappear permanently. I don't see it. But if someone out there knows of a bubble where there's going to be an event or something that's going to happen in a point of time in the future where it's going to dissipate all the value, let me know.
Yeah.
I don't see it. George, we had a supply and demand imbalance before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. We have one now. We're going to have one tomorrow.
Yeah.
So as long as there's supply and demand imbalance ongoing, there's always going to be lots of value associated with real estate. So here at Duke University, the supply and demand imbalance is that there's a ton of demand and not a lot of supply for tickets. So they're all converging to this muddy grass section.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the game's over, there's no more demand. It's gone, and so is the value. So, I think we got to look at the events and the data and the details that drive the markets that we're in. Real estate's high for a reason. We can point to several reasons why. Interest rates are low, demand's very high, there's no inventory to purchase, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
There's a lot of yadas, but there's nothing that's going to be abruptly occurring or changing very, very quickly to create a big void in that demand.
Yeah. Look at the events, the data, the details. I like it.
Say it again?
Events, data, and details.
Stick your chest out and say it with confidence.
Events, data, and details.
Thank you. That sounds great. Events, data, and details.
Yeah,
you were like,
you came up with
events, data, and details.
I lean towards the 4 a.m. DJ voice.
The voice, the Chris Voss 4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So last week I asked you this question about.
So why are you asking me it again?
Well, because I asked you the question about whether or not you like to get into things on the ground floor or wait and see who the winner is going to be.
I just like to get into things.
Yeah, that's true. So the reason I ask you again today is that a parcel of digital land was sold in Decentraland.
$3 million, I heard.
There you go. Yeah.
From a hedge fund.
Yep.
That's put together money just to invest in digital real estate.
Yeah.
You got to love it.
So that's what I was wondering is when it comes to digital real estate, which part are you leaning? Are you leaning?
I haven't bought any digital real estate yet.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's something that it's good to wait for, see how the
I don't know. I haven't bought any yet, so
yeah.
I guess I do feel like for me right now, it's good to wait. I haven't bought any.
Yeah.
I think also I'm just busy as shit.
Yep.
And I just haven't had time to put in the time and research and energy to understand what I need to know to be comfortable making an investment. You know, I say all the time, you have to be comfortable with what you're investing in.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're investing in.
Yeah.
And I just don't know a whole lot of it yet, but I believe it's a real thing and I believe it's coming, the metaverse and the technologies and properties associated with the metaverse. But, here's what I know about this fund. Yeah. So they bought this property for $3 million and they have like a team of engineers and designers and people working on this to create all of the infrastructure in and around this digital property that they bought. Like 40 people on the payroll at some salary, and offices and computers and support and infrastructure. So it's not just the $3 million that they bought the digital land for. It's the $3 million plus, I don't know, it sounds like probably 10 or 15 million or 20 or more. I don't even know, but it sounds like a lot of money.
In a way.
It's construction costs is right. I mean, they're building out their property. They're developing their property. They're digital developers. It's pretty fucking cool.
That is wild.
Really sexy. I'm a real estate developer, not a digital developer, but I can only imagine if I had a team of 40 or 50 or 60 people and I said, hey guys, we just bought $3 million worth of property in Decentraland. We got to go build this out and have virtual concerts and shopping. I mean, to build all that out, it's going to take months and years.
That sounds like a big team too, because like I would imagine when you develop like physical real estate, you don't have a team of 40 designers just for that.
So when I develop physical real estate, I start writing checks the day that they show up for work, and I stop writing checks the day I get my CO.
Right. Yeah.
I imagine with digital real estate, I have to assemble my team. They got to be on my payroll for a long lead time leading up to the potential and hopeful purchase of my $3 million parcel in Decentraland. So I'm paying them for the months leading up to the purchase of the property. And they're still on the payroll during it and after the development. So because I assume as a hedge fund, I'm going to be buying more digital land and digital real estate. So these hedge fund guys must think that there's some real significant value to be captured by taking the risk, deploying it out, hiring dozens and dozens of people at massive salaries, office space, all the infrastructure, the management, the SG&A, selling general administrative, all of that, the graphics, the design elements, all of that stuff. I mean, it sounds like millions and millions. It sounds like tens of millions of dollars to me. Yeah. So they must think that they're going to get that money back in spades by spending it now.
Move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Crazy times, stressful times, uncertain times call on us to be extraordinary.
That sounds like something I would say.
That's true. I first heard you say these words at the beginning of pandemic.
There you go.
I was wondering how they sound to you now.
They sound to me as relevant as they did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Honestly. Look, I think we have to be on our toes and cutting edge and best in class and excellent all the time, regardless of a pandemic or a war or whatever the negative environmental events are going on. I mean, we have to be all of those things. But in light of a pandemic and a war and inflation, and Ray Dalio thinkers say that there's seeds planted for a civil war coming up. I mean, against all that backdrop, you really have to be excellent. You really have to be the best at what you do. You really have to be cutting edge, think out of the box, all that stuff, man. I mean, it's about survival. It's about success. It's about moving forward, not getting sucked backwards. I mean, if you're not deploying great tactics, great thought, great execution all the time, you're just going to get eaten up like Pac-Man. Yeah. And that's when times are good. When times are bad, it only amplifies and exacerbates that. So I want to be excellent all the time, and I want to be thinking outside the box all the time. And I'm begging all of you guys to do it too, because that's going to transform you from a 99% thinker to a 1% thinker. And when you're a 1% thinker, the sky's the limit, and now you can go out and create wealth and success and create the life that you want for yourself, because that's the difference between the wealthy 1% and the middle class and poor 99%. It's the way they think. It's the mindset. So if you change the mindset and get and think like wealthy and successful people do, that's the first step. Now you can go do it.
One sliver of being excellent that you've mentioned before is handwritten notes, the importance of a handwritten note.
I got 2 last week.
So I was going to ask you, what makes a good handwritten note for you?
I got one from one of my lenders who I do a lot of business with, and they're very pleased with me as a customer, and they sent me an iPad mini with a little handwritten note. Dear Peter, thank you so much for your partnership, your friendship, and your business. We look forward to doing so much more with you in the future. It's very bright. And I thought that was a great note. I mean, that's almost word for word. I think I must have read it 5 or 6 times. Yeah. So I thought it was great. I got an iPad mini out of it. I have no use for it, but I gave it to my wife, and she's going to load up our daughter's shows or something on it, and it'll be my daughter's. But it was a really nice thing to do. Yeah. And the card was great. And I'm going to say it again. Thank you for your partnership, your business, and your friendship. So they're not just saying, thanks for all the money that you've flown our way.
Right.
Or they're not just saying, thanks for your business. Or they've combined several things. And I have a good relationship with these guys, so I know they're sincere about it. Okay. And it was a great note to get, and I gave it to my person in the office who's in charge of my book of thank yous. George, you know I have a book of thank yous?
I do, yeah.
So I took the card, and it's going to be now forever memorialized in our book of thank yous.
That's
and
beautiful.
I thought it was a great thank you to get.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, then I have one Zest Quest that is actually our first Zest Quest that I ever asked, but never made it to air because that was like a test episode that we did.
Really?
And so I remember your answers, actually, but I'm interested to see if they're different today. What
I feel like you're trying to trick me, but let's I'll go along with it. Let's go ahead.
What book or books have been very influential for you that have stand out in your mind in helping you succeed in your life?
Several. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Stephen Covey.
That was it? Yeah.
Ah, really?
That was the first one.
Graham Dodd, Investment, was that on the list?
No, I haven't heard that one yet. So what's that one?
The Graham Dodd Book of Investment Principles.
Okay. Yeah.
It's standard college textbook, but it's dry and boring and it's technical. But it helps you learn about mathematical principles to analyze investments. Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yep.
Was that on the list before?
I don't think so.
Art of War, Sun Tzu.
That was one. Yeah. Classic.
I'd say Fountainhead.
Fountainhead we've talked about, but that wasn't an answer to that question. But yeah, we did talk about that a while ago. That's on my list.
Yeah. Let's see, what other books have helped? I mean...
There's only one more that I remember you mentioning. So.
Who Moved My Cheese or something like that. It was a management book. That wasn't that massive for me, but it was a good book. Think and Grow Rich.
No.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
No, I mean all these are great answers. Which
I'm trying to think of what
it actually. So I don't remember the actual title, but it was. You said Winston Churchill.
Oh, everything by Winston Churchill. Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
I've read all the Winston Churchill books, the biographies. I love that guy.
Yeah.
He was such an interesting.
Yeah. What about
figure.
Winston Churchill? Captures you?
Oh, so much. Yeah. He was not well liked for his personality, but he was well revered for his policies.
Yeah.
He overcame a lot. He garnered a lot of power without being in a position of power at first. I mean, he was just sort of a guy in the system, but he was very powerful. He was great at building relationships. Yeah. He was great at communication. He had the greatest quotes, and he was a strong man. He was like a man's man, I feel, in a lot of ways. Not from a physical, like, soldier, military, I'll fight you perspective, but just from his mental toughness and his smarts were enviable. And I always enjoyed reading the stories and hearing the stories about how he handled certain situations and made decisions and formed alliances. And I think it was great. So, yeah, Winston Churchill. I wouldn't have thought to answer the question about the books as Winston Churchill books, but if you were to ask me who was an influential person to help me, as a to name a person, I would have said Winston Churchill.
That makes sense. Cool.
Thanks for that. That was fun.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm glad that I displayed some sort of consistency.
Very consistent. Yeah, and obviously you had other books that were made the list as well.
Well, I just started thinking of management and business books. Who Moved My Cheese was just like
and you have talked about that before,
just not
in relation to that question. But awesome, cool. Well, that's what I got, Peter. Anything you want to talk about before we head over to Q&A?
So I want to do, thanks. Yeah. I want to do a quick bit because I'm going to need you to make a little blurb out of this for me. So,
ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
Hey everyone, so I want to share with you an organization that I'm involved with. It's very near and dear to my heart. It's called Dream Foundation. So we're going to put up the link, dreamfoundation.org. I'm involved with this great organization. So what we do at Dream Foundation is we provide end-of-life dreams to terminally ill adults. It's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I want you guys to just check it out, gain some awareness. I want to spread the message of this wonderful organization. These people help a lot of people. Last year we delivered close to 3,000 dreams, and we've got corporate sponsors, and we've got infrastructure all over the country. We've been around for over 30 years. I'm involved with this great group of people, and from time to time, I'm going to be reaching out to a lot of you out there, asking you to help support me if it's something that resonates with you. And we'll put up a link, and we're raising money for the Dream Foundation. And I want you guys to check it out, get to know us. And if you feel so compelled, join me and help me in raising some money and donate some money to the Dream Foundation. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Amazing. Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thanks, George.
Ready for another Q&A, Peter?
George, let's get to it, man.
I know you love
Why
the
do you
names.
keep me waiting.
Okay, we got to do the names. So
Who we got?
Cal,
John Krasnowski? Betty Davis? Who do we got?
Cal Delakia.
Cal Delakia.
Yeah.
Cal, what do you got?
He says, as a property owner, what do you think of the concept of befriending your competition? I've heard people say it can be a good source of referrals and advice. How should I view competing property owners in my market?
Advice sometimes, referrals, I don't know, maybe a very, very little bit like, hey, I'm fully rented, go see my competitor down the street. But look, we rent apartments mostly online these days, so I'm not even sure how a referral like that happens anymore. Here's the greatest reason to befriend your competition, because when they're done owning their building, you want it. So that's how you're going to get deal flow, that's how you're going to get pipeline, that's how you're going to get opportunities. And you want to have a community of your people. I always want to know my competition, not only personally, but I want to know how they run their business because I want to do it better than them. So the more you know your competition, you're going to learn things not only about them as people, but them as competition and business owners. And you're going to adjust and pivot and grow your business according to be competitive in the marketplace. So I love getting to know your competition. Don't live in a vacuum. Get to know your competition. But George, the best thing I love about competition is that one day they're not going to be competition anymore and they're going to sell me their buildings. And I've gotten so many buildings and so many deals over the years from friendly competitors who it was time for them to exit and sell, and I was the call that they made. And I came through and I bought that building. So I think for a whole host of reasons, get to know your competition, get to know how they operate, get to know them personally, develop a relationship. You want a lot from them, but you really want that building when the time comes.
Yeah, I think I remember our conversation with Fred Beans a while ago. He talked about that, where he bought a building and he said, if you're around long enough, good things happen. And so, his neighbor left, and so then he took that building. The other neighbor left, he took that building, and that's how it worked.
We got to do another thing with Fred, and we have to start rerunning some of that footage because it was my first time interviewing someone, and I was horrible at it. Not a great interviewer, but he's such an inspiring guy, and I love him. He's just a monster in the business world and a great entrepreneur and a great guy, and every bit of advice he's ever mentioned I stick to like glue. So I think our viewers might appreciate more Fred.
Yeah, we'll do that. That sounds awesome. All right, fantastic. So I'll see you next time. Thanks so much,
George. All right, see you.
If you like what you just heard, you can subscribe to The Daily Cash Flow on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'd love it if you left us a review. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at SiegelCap and on Instagram at Siegel.cap. As always, if you're an accredited investor, go to SiegelCapital.com and take our survey to see if you qualify to take part in one of our apartment building deals. That's SIEGEL Capital.com.